Hello and welcome everybody, I'm the Rambling Director, and today we are going to be getting back into The Christmas Carol. I've probably talked more about The Christmas Carol than just about anything else on this channel. I've noticed something about the way I do these videos. I tend to kind of pick a topic and make several videos on it before moving on to something else. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It just happens that A Christmas Carol and its various adaptations is something that I kind of seem to be becoming known for. Most people that follow my channel seem to be coming from my Christmas Carol commentaries. And so to that end, I have gotten several people ask, why don't you do the feature-length commentaries of The Christmas Carol anymore? And the simple answer is, I really find it hard to get the videos with the clips of the Christmas Carol movies to stay on YouTube. It's hard to even get them uploaded to begin with. So I've kind of started doing more of these sort of review style videos because I just don't have much of a choice. It's really difficult to get them approved because a lot of these big studios, a couple of the big studios that have flagged me, don't even own the movies they're flagging. So if that tells you anything, it's not exactly easy to get these videos up and to get them to stick. But to make up for it and to make up for the fact I only talked about one of these movies last year, this year we're starting early, we're starting in November, and we're going to be talking about pretty much all of my very favorite versions this year, if I can get through them, which of course is always the problem with me. But without taking any more time on this introduction, let's talk about the 1935 version. Now, a lot of people think, and it's a perfectly logical assumption, that the 1935 version is the first talkie Christmas Carol. But I did a little research and it turns out there was a version made in 1928. But here's the catch. I can't find it. I think it might be a lost film, but the audio is available. You can listen to the movie, but I'm a little torn on it because it's a short film, so it's not a feature-length film. The Seymour Hicks version from 1935 is a feature-length film, and so to me, for my money, I still say this is the first talkie version of A Christmas Carol. I've been unable to find any versions that predate it with audio that you can actually watch the movie. So until I'm proven otherwise, this is the first talkie Christmas Carol. Now, Seymour Hicks plays Scrooge in this. Hey, Seymour Hicks. That's what most people say when they visit me here in Tennessee. Sir Seymour Hicks is actually a really fantastic Scrooge. But to some of you folks who aren't into older movies, who don't really watch a lot of films from the 20s and 30s, I could really understand how you would sit down to watch this film and say, that looks pretty rough. I'm not sure I really want to spend time on this movie, but I promise you, if you give it a chance and you love this story, this version offers a ton to love. It is possibly one of the most original versions ever made, and that's odd because it's so early, you would think tons of other versions would take influence from it, and yet the only version that I can tell has taken a lot of influence from it, bizarrely, is Robert Zemeckis' version, which is almost a remake of this movie. The first few shots do look kind of rough, and that's because the film has aged, and I don't mean like the movie is older, like it's dated. I mean like the film stock clearly degraded before this movie was preserved digitally. So there's a lot of wear and tear on the film. I don't know if there is a remaster, but I'd love to see somebody digitally remaster this film. But within just a few seconds, you start to see that actually the camera choices, the cinematography and the lighting is really good in this film for a 1935 film. In fact, there's a shot where Bob Cratchit is going to get some coal, and Scrooge is watching him in a mirror, in a kind of over-the-shoulder reverse shot, so that he can see Bob. But it also tells us about Scrooge's character. He has this mirror set up so that he can continue working and look up to check on Bob and see if he's working without turning around, because time is money and turning around takes time. That's kind of awesome. We get the typical scene that you see in a lot of versions where he gets chastised for using coal. But in this version, Scrooge doesn't just chastise him. He is really a nasty piece of work about Bob wanting to have enough coal to not freeze to death.
Get on with your work, sir. That'll keep you warm enough. I'm not cold. Why should you be?
It's really almost hard to watch how he abuses his employee.
You have a wife and family to support, I understand. How much am I constrained to pay you a week for your services?
15 shillings, sir.
Be to your interest, sir, to see that you're worth it.
Now, I'll point out a few times in this that Bob Zemeckis obviously took inspiration for the Disney Christmas Carol starring Jim Carrey. And one of the times is when the Lord Mayor of London is having a party. And we see the cooks doing all this stuff, preparing the meal. And a couple of the chefs are tasting all the wine. And you get the vibe that they're slowly getting drunk. Where Bob Zemeckis clearly took some influence is a bunch of beggars sit outside looking in at the kitchens, and the chefs throw them the extra bits and bobs of the meal. Now, actually, I think this version does that way better because the Bob Zemeckis film almost makes it seem like the chef is kind of condescending to them. But this, it's almost like the chefs are just such good-willed, nice guys that they just always love to throw out some goodies to the local urchin kids. I think this film does that a lot better, though, because it has this great little moment where the mayor is eating this grand Christmas feast, but the boys outside have received really just the scraps from that meal. But the chefs in their generosity threw it out to them. And so the boys have benefited from the generosity of Christmas, and because they've received just enough to make this time so special for them, that's kind of a Christmas feast to them. And so as the Lord Mayor and his elite guests are singing God Save the Queen, outside the urchin boys are quietly singing God Save the Queen. That's kind of cool because we don't get that a lot. Maybe it's really important, considering the date I'm posting this video, that we think about that. It is kind of a good thing when we prize the ideals that we as a culture aspire to. There's no big philosophical speech like in the Guy Pearce Christmas Carol about the utilitarian purpose behind Christmas and how it keeps the have-nots from taking over or whatever bullcrap. No, this is just simply showing the relationship of what happens when people are generous with what they have rather than hoarding it up for themselves.
I help to support the institutions we've just mentioned. They cost enough. People are badly off, they'd better go there.
Many can't go there. Many would rather die.
Well, if they'd rather die, they'd better do it. And decrease the surplus population.
Now, the thing I love probably the most about this version is sort of the same thing I loved about the animated Netflix film that came out. Was that last year or the year before? Oh my gosh. The years are like bleeding together for me. They've been doing that since COVID ended. Sorry. Whenever it came out, the Netflix animated film had the same sort of thing. I love the ghosts. I love that they took huge chances with these ghosts and did really different things with them. What surprises me is that the ideas of the ghosts in this film are so brilliant, and yet hardly anybody has taken influence from this version. I don't know why. The first ghost, of course, is Jacob Marley. And what is so interesting about him, for me personally, it doesn't entirely work. It doesn't stick the landing. But the concept is so brilliant. Jacob Marley shows up and explains that only Scrooge can see him.
Look well, Ebenezer Scrooge, for only you can see me. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
He's invisible to us, the audience. And on top of that, the guy playing Marley in this version sounds like Claude Rains, so whenever it happened, I was like, the Invisible Man? What are you doing here? Again, again, I don't think it entirely sticks the landing, but the concept is really great. Now, this is where Seymour Hicks, as an actor, also really shines, because for all of the ghosts except Christmas Present, he is miming. He is kind of pantomiming against nobody. He's acting against nobody because we don't see the other ghosts in person. He's not talking to an other actual human being. Yet, he plays it off really well. He mimes the actions. Why are you fettered with that great chain? And you can see that in his mind, he is imagining what this looks like. And you can tell he's not just, oh yeah, you know, looking around like some actors do. No, he is imagining something specific. And he is really dedicating himself to following that line of sight. Oh, he moved over here? Okay, and the eye lines match so well, like as if he is talking to somebody of a consistent height. Next on the roster of really interesting ideas for ghosts, Christmas Past is just the shape of a man in glowing white light. I love that because it makes, and this is kind of what the book does too. If you've read the book describes Christmas Past as being something sort of like a candle. That's what Bob Zemeckis literalized. He's literally a candle in that production. That his face shines out like a bright light, and he's dressed in a white robe. Something, also the book mentions that very few versions try, except for the Simon Callow version, is that Past is supposed to be getting older and younger at the same time in this odd cycle. Now, what this version does is just make him a ethereal shape of a person. I like this because it makes Christmas Past as mercurial as Christmas Yet to Come. As if the past, it was known at one point, but now it's faded. It's become this kind of unknowable thing that can never be recaptured. It's so poetic. I love that idea. It's so well put together. All of the flashbacks in Christmas Past are bordered with this white glow, almost as if the light of Christmas Past is illuminating it. Gosh, I love that. Now, the scenes with Belle are the best version of the Belle Ebenezer argument that I have ever seen in a movie. And I will stand by that unless somebody makes one that just kicks butt. This has been my favorite for a long time. I love the energy of these actors, and I love the way Belle, she just takes no nonsense off of Ebenezer. I mean, a lot of versions she's very sad and resigned, but this version, she is like, she's laying down the law to him.
They asked you for a little breathing space, a little time in which to pay. That was all.
Enough of this, Belle. I am ready to make allowances for your feelings as a woman. But I must ask you to leave my business affairs alone.
I've tried hard not to believe what they've said about you. I'd give anything not to believe it now. But the evidence in my own eyes and ears, I must believe. You are changed. Changed in every way. You're not the man you were.
It's that sort of bombastic theater acting that you got in a lot of older movies, which I'm always saying, I'd rather have actors who overact a little bit than to have that modern, I'm just going to stare into the camera and whisper, and then somehow, if I keep a perfectly straight face, you will feel the emotion for me. No. Bullcrap. You're an actor. Act! The one thing I gotta say against it is something that from this scene on becomes kind of an issue. Sound mixing in modern movies is terrible. Everybody I know has to watch movies with subtitles now because I can't hear anything anymore. Older movies tended to have better sound mixing. I don't know why. The sound mixing in this movie is not very good when the music starts. And I made my wife kind of laugh because at one point I just could not hear what one of the characters was saying. And I literally was like, guys, orchestra, piano, please. I can't hear a word that is being said, please. I mean, I know that the music adds emotion to the scene or whatever, but like if I can't hear the dialogue, it's kind of hard for me to feel the emotion. Something I almost forgot to mention until I was editing this video is that there is a scene where we see Ebenezer witness Belle with her new family and her new husband, and gets to see what he missed out on. Now that scene is in the book as well, but it makes it in a very few versions, so I always love whenever a version goes that extra mile. Unlike the George C. Scott version, where he remains hard-hearted at this, in this version, we see Seymour Hicks is overcome and just can't take anymore. Christmas Present is good in this version, but he's a little grumpy. My wife actually said that he kind of looks like a dumpling. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but here it is. I was like really happy Christmas presents. My favorite Christmas present is in the George C. Scott version, which we'll be talking about this year. I've specifically been waiting to talk about it for the anniversary. At the beginning of the scene with Christmas Present, right before he shows up, Scrooge is sleepily trying to use a snuffer to put out a candle. This was such a great setup, because then at the end, when he says, haunt me no longer, and he throws down his hand, there's a wipe effect, and the Ghost of Christmas Past wipes off the screen from top to bottom, and right when it reaches the bottom of the screen, you cut to his hand putting the snuffer on the candle. Now, many versions have tried to realize the scene from the book where Scrooge puts a giant snuffer over the Ghost of Christmas Past to snuff out the light of truth. It's a great little bit of symbolism. But I think sometimes it kind of looks a little goofy or cheesy, or in the Zemeckis version, it's just laughable. This, by kind of making it more figurative, really works surprisingly better than most of the other versions that do literalize that moment. There's also this little scene with Christmas Present where they kind of walk through the city of London and everybody is singing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. This moment would be reused and repurposed for many versions to come, including the Alastair Sim version and the Patrick Stewart version. They also show the city of London as a miniature, and the buildings that are close up to the camera have moving shadows inside of them. Miniature people, moving shadows inside of them. I thought it was real at first. It wasn't until the camera cranes up into this, what could only really be done in a helicopter shot, that I noticed, holy crap, that's a miniature. And the only reason I knew was because they didn't overcrank the camera to slow it down. The miniature is great, and the fact that they had those little shadows to sell it in the foreground, gosh, most films in the 1960s didn't think of doing that. So for them to do it in 1935, the filmmaking in this movie is brilliant, and there's no other word you can use for it. It's just brilliant. Christmas Yet to Come shows up, and this is one of those moments that I was talking about where Bob Zemeckis clearly took a lot of inspiration from. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is a literal shadow of things to come. We never see his physical shape. It's just the shadow of a pointing finger. And Scrooge himself is actually a shadow as he accompanies the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. Now, I think the one thing that they should have done, they didn't commit to the idea fully, so they put Scrooge's face over the shadow of Seymour Hicks, and I think they should not have done that. They should have just had his shadow there and dubbed the dialogue over it, and just committed to the idea that we were only going to see his shadow for those scenes. That would have made it work so much better, but even as it is, it works shockingly well. The scene where Scrooge's housekeeper is kind of pawning his stuff that she's stolen is actually legitimately scary in this version, which no other version has ever made me think. The shadows on their faces and how they all look, they just, they look creepy, okay? They just all look creepy. I haven't talked about it up until now, but Bob Cratchit in this version is fantastic. And the scene where he is sitting by little Tim as he is dying is a great little scene. It's just one line of dialogue and a couple of well-chosen blocking and acting decisions that make it really powerful. Bob in this is kind of the archetypal Bob. Not a lot of tears or dramatic performance. He is almost a saintly character. The scenes in the graveyard with Christmas Yet to Come are brilliantly staged. So Scrooge is talking to Christmas Yet to Come, who, of course, we still never see. And then we see the shadow of the pointing finger, and Scrooge grabs it, and we see him wrestling with the hand. And Much like in the book, we see the hand begins to shake and quiver. It's sort of almost a reinterpretation of that moment, but given a lot more attention, because all of Scrooge's redemption lines are played as a physical altercation between himself and the shadow of things to come. Gosh, that is so clever. There's also a great moment where he's trying to literally sponge away the writing of the stone. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet, but now is the best time to do it. The transitions in this film are way ahead of their time. I always try to make a point of praising great transitions because too many directors do not give any thought to their transitions. And transitions are so crucially important, and so many directors, they just don't think about it, and that's why so many movies, you just dip to black at the end of a scene, and unless that is part of the visual language you are setting up, you should never do that. Every transition should have a point. Dip to blacks, by the way, can have a point, but like they have to actually be saying something. You can't just use them because you didn't think about how this scene was going to connect to this scene. That you should never do that. And in this film, every scene is connected by a great transition. And the best transition in the movie is, it's such a toying with my expectations, and yet this movie came out before most of the other versions that I complain about. When he is wiping away the words on the stone, it does a graphic fade match cut where Scrooge is in bed rubbing his hand against the mattress, sponging away. And it is a perfect match cut. In fact, almost every transition in the film is a graphic match cut or graphic match cut done with a fade. And they all match up so wonderfully. It is crazy, like 1935. It's not like it's the most brilliant movie ever made, and yet you can tell that the director had a really clear vision and used filmic grammar that we don't see a lot of in the 30s. We wouldn't see a lot of probably really until getting into the late 50s. I don't know. I just love to praise the filmmaking because too many critics out there whine and moan about, oh, this continuity error, or ooh, this little tiny bit of the story that didn't make sense that nobody else would have noticed, but I'm a professional complainer, derpy-der. And they never ever get around to mentioning the filmmaking, which is what we should be talking about in a film review. When Scrooge comes to Fred's house for dinner, it's just wonderfully handled, and there's a great pan of all of the party guests, and they're all agog, you know, just like, oh, he showed up. It's been years. We've been hearing about this man for years, and he showed up, and he's saying, Merry Christmas. This is not the guy we've heard about. But then we have one of my favorite moments in any Christmas Carol movie. One of my favorite moments of Scrooge as a character.
A Merry Christmas to you all.
A Merry Christmas.
The end is the same ending you see in a lot of versions, where he pretends that he's going to fire Bob Cratchit, but actually, no, he's going to promote him and give him a raise, and he's going to be a second father to Tiny Tim. The big difference in this one is he gives Bob the day off and says, go back to your family. They want to spend the day after Christmas with you. Come on. Which I think actually is a better ending than most versions, where he keeps him at work anyway. I mean, it's nice, the whole, you know, add more coal to the fire. In fact, we probably should have seen that. It would have paid off that moment at the beginning better if he told Bob to put more coal in the fire. But you know what? It doesn't even matter. And you know why it doesn't matter? Because this version is just spectacular. We get one last little scene after Scrooge gives Bob the day off, and I think it's the best scene in the movie. It really drives home the entire message, with really just a look from Ebenezer. I've mentioned this in several of my Christmas Carol videos, and I know some people don't like to hear it. But Christmas and A Christmas Carol, at their hearts, are Christian stories. Charity, benevolence, generosity, forbearance, these things were not virtues before the modern Christian world came and made them such. So we end with Scrooge going into church, presumably for the first time in a very long time. He ends up by chance in a pew right next to Bob Cratchit. He pats Bob on the hand to show him that he's there with him. The two men kind of share a look, and together they go back to singing and praising God together. This is a kind of cool way of showing that at the end of the movie, Scrooge sees himself and Bob as equal, because he sees them equal in the eyes of God. No longer a boss, an elder, telling his inferior what to do, no longer slave or free. But rather, Bob in Scrooge's eyes is an equal, also made in the image and likeness of God. And we see that the entire relationship between these two men are going to be different, not just because of the scene where Scrooge shows Bob that he's changed, but because now they're on an even playing field in Scrooge's eyes. So everything, from the lighting, the cinematography, it's deliberately underlit in some scenes, and I love that. The lighting, the cinematography, the acting, the ideas behind the ghosts and how they would be represented, and the way that the past, present, and future are represented, and the joy of the ending. All of it is so spectacular, I can't recommend it enough. So please go and check it out if you haven't already. So that's all I have for today, everybody. Thank you for watching, God bless you, and I will see you in the next Christmas Carol.